according to your conductor theory, consciousness is basically a dream reflecting your actions and perceptions of the immediate past. Do you think we might function in a similar way if we weren't conscious?
I don't think that we would function in a similar way if we weren't conscious. As a rough approximation, that's why I use this conductor metaphor. Look at an orchestra. Your brain can be maybe understood like an orchestra that has 50 different instruments that all play different parts of the music. And you could say that each of them is a brain region that is computing a different set of patterns, computing a different function. And each of these brain regions draws inputs from the rest of the orchestra. So each instrument is listening to what the instruments around them are playing and uses part of that information to riff on it. So it's basically in some sense like a jazz improvisation that is happening with local listening to what happens in there. And the conductor is a very specific instrument. It's not a magical godlike thing. It's just an instrument like the others in terms of capacity and ability, but it's specialized on listening to the entire orchestra. But it cannot practically do this. It can just switch between the instruments that it picks out, right? So it has an attention that it can focus narrow or wide, but it's limited. So it will only skim the surface of what the individual instruments are doing, but it can pick out disharmonies in this thing and fix solutions if there are global disharmonies in the entire orchestra to coordinate many instruments in such a way that the jazz piece that is being played works out globally if you have so many people that play together, right? So if you take out this conductor, you get a sleepwalker. A sleepwalker might be able to get up at night and open the fridge and make dinner, but it doesn't serve a purpose. There is nobody who's hungry. The dinner is not going to get eaten. If you ask the sleepwalker why he is going out of his bed and is opening the fridge and making dinner, the sleepwalker is going to give a random answer, if at all. Right? If you have ever talked to a person who is talking at night in their sleep, whether they're getting up or not, what they say usually doesn't make sense. Right? What happens there is you have an orchestra that is still playing some kind of music, but the music is incoherent. And this creation of coherence, I think, is the purpose of our consciousness. And it works by focusing attention into a cohesive story. The perception in our mind doesn't need to have a memory of how it got to the interpretation of what it currently sees. It's a process of convergence. So it works with the equivalent of gradient descent in neural networks. You just basically figure out in which direction do you need to change the parameters of the system to improve its performance, to improve the interpretation of reality. So when you are looking at the world, you initially see a bunch of patterns when you wake up in the morning, maybe, and then you try to make sense of these patterns to get them coalesce into a meaningful hierarchical representation of interacting objects in a room that you are looking at, right? You want to understand the world that you are in, the place that you have in that world. And it largely works just via convergence. So lots of small independent units are trying to find the best way to make sense of what they're seeing, and as a result, gradually get a world that percolates into separate objects that make sense to you. And sometimes they don't, right? Sometimes you are waking up in the middle of the night and you see some kind of weird shape in front of you, you don't know what it is. And then your consciousness comes in and tries to make decisions. So it tries out, am I looking possibly at a lamp that in the night that is being shown on by another lamp that is outside of my window? Or am I looking at a temporary pattern because a car is parked in front of my house? This car is shining its headlights into my room. And so I see the reflection of that headlight as reflected through the door of my garden entry or something like that, right? So all these hypotheses allow you to make conditional interpretations of reality until you find one that makes sense. And for these conditional inferences, you need to maintain a memory. So you need to understand these decisions did I make by interpreting certain features in such a way. And now I try to see if the greater whole makes sense. So you need to have an index memory of where you came from. This is your stream of consciousness. And that's one of the roles that our conscious attention has. And the narrative, the story of what I attended to in every step is a necessary byproduct of this generative constructive process. right? So mental construction requires the maintenance of a protocol usually, and this protocol allows you to backtrack and undo your decisions and to justify them and improve them. And that, I think, is the reason why we have that particular kind of reflective local process that works on top of the perception, directs your attention, and has a reason to direct its attention in a particular way, right? So it's conceivable that you build intelligent agents that don't need that. But our particular kind of mind needs it because of the resource constraints that we have in making sense of reality. You need focused attention with a memory connected to that attention that has a control model of that attention. And consciousness is largely the contents of that control model of attention.